Lebanon still enforces a 1955 law criminalizing contact with Israel for over 70 years. You previously stated you would push Lebanon on this issue. And there is some people still going to prison last month. So did you raise it you will raise it with President Trump?
The Abraham Accords have been, I think, a tremendous success. I think you're going to see a lot of countries joining pretty soon. As you know, we have our original group, and it's so successful for them, economically successful. It's been there. Nobody left, even during this time of conflict. So, no, I think Lebanon has a very important place.
President Trump speaking about Lebanon and the Abraham Accords, and this is a very interesting development that could be happening here. Lebanon, of course, at the White House today. What is this all about? And I think that the first question that we need to set the table with is, what are the Abraham Accords? We've talked about them quite a bit, but it's important to understand what they are and the success that they have been in order to understand the impact that Lebanon's relationship here could possibly be. Let's welcome retired Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano onto the show, Senior Counselor to Heritage President Kevin Roberts and E.W. Richardson Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome back to the show. Jim, it's good to have you with us. Can you talk to us about the Abraham Accords in general, but also the presence of Lebanon at the White House today, what kind of impact that could have?
Yeah, so the Abraham Accords was a great band from the 60s. No, it's a different.
You got me.
So this was actually an initiative in the first Trump administration, and it was actually a concept that he came into office, which was the idea is that, we want regions to be more self-sufficient and self-reliant. That not only reduces the burden of the United States on its global leadership, but it creates more resilient, more useful partners for America. And so, one of the things that's held the Middle East back forever is there's always been this lack of a common purpose between Israel and their Arab neighbors. I mean, they only have a formal peace agreement with the Egyptians. The idea is moving beyond just peace agreement. Working on collective security, economic integration and development, political and diplomatic agenda that's harmonized. And that is the goal of the Abraham Accords. And there's the Isaac Accords, which is a association of Israel with Latin American countries, kind of similar concept. And so very much, it's in the same vein as we told Europeans, like, hey, you have to be as interested in the freedom and security and prosperity of Europe as we are. I mean, I think it's the same message for the Middle East. And what's significant is the president made some progress on the first administration. The Biden administration basically kind of did nothing. But the president came back into office. He wanted to add momentum to the Abraham Accords, so it's continued to be a priority. But here's what's been the big difference. The war against Iran has taken off the table everything that allows Iran to be the big bully in the region. And the United States has only demonstrated that this is not a 10-foot tall enemy. This is a country with clay feet. But we've significantly reduced all the things that made the Iranians at to the other neighbors in the region. That has created the opening space for countries to really kind of elevate themselves and reassert themselves. And not only has it been, the prospects for alignment with Kuwait and Bahrain, Oman and Qatar and UAE and Saudi Arabia, but it's, taking countries which really essentially are failed states and parts of countries that are failed states like Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and making them self-sufficient, productive countries that aren't under the sway and influence of the Iranians. And getting the Lebanese to the table with the Israelis to start talking about how do we have a free country that isn't dominated by Hezbollah, which is nothing more than a puppet of the Iranians. That's hugely important. And when I think I've said this on your show, is everybody's fixating on what's happening in the war, which is exactly the wrong thing. These guys have already lost. What we ought to be fixating is we have pummeled the Iranians into a trench. What are the things we should be doing now to take advantage of that? And topping the list is the reconstruction of Gaza and Lebanon and Syria. So we take regions that were the problem, were the open running sores of the Middle East, and we turn them into productive parts of that community. And that's why what's going on in Lebanon and Syria today is so important. And we should not just, one, it wouldn't be happening if not for Trump's success in Iran. But two is if we don't take advantage to do these things, then we have squandered all the advances we made in Iran.
Yeah. James Carafano speaking with us right now. I'm going to ask a stupid question. You make me feel comfortable to ask my stupid questions. So I'm going to throw this one out at you, and you can kind of quantify it for me. But being somebody who was 17 years old when 9/11 happened, I was a senior in high school watching that happen. I don't think I even knew the word terrorism outside of movies.
Right.
But watching that happen, in a moment, that moment transformed everybody's understanding of reality. But it made me feel like a very young adult all of a sudden, as opposed to an old kid. And Syria seemed to come out of that as, in my mind, maybe unintellectually so, as a huge adversary of the United States. And now we're 25 years later, and Syria is in the game. And President Trump has gone to the Middle East and said, I think that a prosperous Syria is good for the world. So things change over the course of time. And I'm looking at all these, I'm reading here on the Fox News Chiron right now, Trump not ruling out talks with Hezbollah. Is everything changeable if you're willing to try?
Yeah, I think, first of all, what's going on in Syria today is only possible because of three things. And the answer to all three questions, by the way, is Donald Trump. Is Syria at one point was the ground zero of the ISIS caliphate. It literally was the birthplace of a group that felt that they were actually going to take over the entire region. In his first term, Trump came in and literally annihilated the ISIS. So that's one thing. In the second term, he came back, and the Russians are so weakened because of Ukraine, the U.S. pushing them out of Latin America. And they've essentially had to abandon Syria, which has long been their client state. And the third thing was we just literally annihilated the Iranians, which had built a huge foothold in Syria as a power projection platform to attack Israel. So now all of a sudden Syria went from being a country which was essentially doing the whim of every foreign, because the only reason Assad remained in power in Syria was because of the foreign support he had. So instead of being the playthings of foreigners, Syria had a chance to seize its own future, and Trump's said he's willing to work with them. So things can change, but you know what? Things don't change if you sit on the couch and drink a beer, and just wait for the world to. Things change because you go out and you make the change, and that's what Donald Trump has done.
Yeah. I mean, the word that continues to come to my mind regarding this administration is resolve. And I don't think you can have resolve in the magnitude of what this administration is doing if you don't have a clear-eyed goal. And, I want to ask you that question, what is the ultimate goal and success that President Trump is looking to achieve? If he got exactly what he wanted, what would that look like at the end of his term going into the next guy?
Well, it would be the Abraham Accords. It would be the idea that the region can essentially fend for itself, and it can provide collective security and economic development and political and diplomatic integration, and be a deterrent to not just Iran, but to penetration by transnational terrorist groups or the Russians or the Chinese. That would be the perfect outcome. You have to have resolve. I think you're a great point. Resolve and be focused on outcomes. And to be fair, the Bush administration, the Biden administration, they had resolve and they had focused on outcomes, but their resolve was to open the borders, and their outcome was to bring in 20 million illegal aliens. So any White House can do this. Thank God Trump came in and actually wants to do things that are going to make American. I guess it is actually make America great again. Yeah. So good for him.
Another question I have for you, I think, is Nicaragua. leader there says, hey, how about no more elections? I don't know if you have much to say about that story specifically,
Yeah, I have
but
a lot.
but I just think, all the squabbles that we have in the United States of America and, maybe one political party that thinks that we suck as a country on the whole, it seems to be the marketing plan for them. But you do look at these other places, these are, real legitimate countries with borders, and the leaders are like, no more elections. What's it like to be in Nicaragua today?
Well, I think it's the last man standing. I mean, I think when you look at the leftist control, and we just say leftist, we just don't mean that people that don't like conservatives. Yeah. People that were, if you're China and you're showing up, we're happy to take your money. If you're a criminal cartel, we're happy to take your money. If you're Iranians or Islamist terrorists, we're happy to do business with you. If you're the Russians, come on in, right? They would sell out everything in the region and they sell out their entire people. I mean, those are the people that were running the continent 2 years ago. They've lost almost everywhere. They're going to lose a big election in Brazil coming up. And so who's left of this cabal of people who essentially would do business with anybody if it enriched them, and no matter how much impoverishing it was to their people? With Cuba under pressure, the last Yahoo standing is Nicaragua. And so this is not a signal of anything other than desperation. Like, I'm going to just control power forever. So nobody's going to oust me by an election. There's not going to be any resurgence of democracy in my country. Well, that's like putting a target on your face.
Last question before we let you go. Cuba, there's reports here this week that Cuba has infiltrated the United States government and is trying to meddle and just undermine, I suppose, the United States of America. Is that of consequence to you? Is that a report that you hear out in the national media and you're like, duh? Obviously, or what's your reaction to that, especially knowing that Marco Rubio and President Trump have spent a lot of their extra time, of what extra time they have, saying, yeah, Cuba's a problem that needs to be solved as well?
Well, I could have written that report in the 1950s.
It's okay. So it's
Here's the difference, though, right? Which is it is aligned now with all kinds of other malicious influence, from Islamists to the Chinese to everybody else. And in many ways, it is a conduit and an instrument for them. And so it's actually a much bigger challenge than it's ever been. And taking it off the table is more important. And the other thing is Trump is like a guy that's fighting a gang war, but every day he takes another tool of the gang off the table, the switchblade, the chain, the gun. So, he's taken off and in the end, these guys have nothing to fight with. And if they want to be in America and they want to peddle their wacky, stupid ideas, fine, knock yourself out. But you're going to do it without meddling from the Cubans, without money from China, without influence from the Russians, without, zillionaires like Soros spending dark money to prevent organized political violence in the United States. Then if you want to take us on, come at us. But it's like Batman taking, you take all the bad guys, right? You take Mr. Freeze and the Riddler and the Joker off the table, and then you go to the criminals of Gotham and say, bring it on.
Just in light of what you said there, you could have written that article in the 1950s and so on and so forth. I don't know the answer to this question, but what was President Obama doing in 2016, going to Cuba and being like, hey, everybody, this looks fun? I mean, it's the optics of what I remember from that visit. If it's known that Cuba has been involved in trying to infiltrate for that long, why would the president of the United States in 2016 go to Cuba and try to make things look normalized?
We can all say, Obama was naive, engaging with the Cubans, sending boatloads of cash to Iran, doing nothing about the Chinese, promising the Russians that after the election, things would be a lot easier on them. I think when we unpack all of this, Barack Obama was not a naive president who's like Jimmy Carter, who's just trying to be a nice guy in the world and got his face kicked in. Barack Obama was trying to push an agenda that was post-American. And he was always doing that. And the longer he was in the presidency, I think the more the mask slipped away. But he is the ultimate Manchurian candidate. He is the ultimate Quisling. He was never out to do great things for this country. He was out to remake America as part of this world blah blah that he had bought into in college. And I'm sure he laughed every day when people took him seriously when he went up and he said, I care about the United States. I care about the American flag. I care about the American people. I'm just trying to be a nice guy here, the Cubans. And that was all a lie.
Well, he did tell us he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States of America. He got pretty close, I would say. We always appreciate your time, Jim Carafano. Thanks for being with us again today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.